Hello, everyone. Welcome to Amplified, the podcast where we explore how artificial intelligence is transforming industries and amplifying human potential. I'm your host, Ishaant Majumdar, a high school junior curious about how technology, design, and innovation comes together to create a meaningful impact. Today, I'm honored to have Mr. Ben Koh, CEO of Kaleidoscope, with us. Kaleidoscope is a design and innovation company that blends engineering, design, and user experience to help organizations solve complex problems and create products that truly resonate with people. He has extensive experience leading multidisciplinary teams, applying innovative approaches to design, and leveraging technology to create human centered solutions. In this episode, we'll explore how AI and technology are transforming design and product innovation, how teams can create a more impactful solution, and what this means for businesses and communities. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Ashant. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just to get us started, what was your journey to get into this position, working at Kaleidoscope?
Yeah, so I'm trained as a biomedical engineer, which means a lot of my background is designing, engineering, testing medical devices, drug delivery systems, working with surgical robots and things like that. And so I joined Kaleidoscope because I was an engineer who was very curious about the human experience. A lot of times, engineers have a reputation for approaching problems, thinking about the mechanism or the technology or the solution first. And what I was looking for was a company like Kaleidoscope that instead put the technology and the solution second, put the people first. So
Mm,
understanding what problems need to be solved in the world, this is done through design research and interviewing and observation of what are real challenges facing real humans. And only then, as you contextualize the problem statement, do you begin creating potential solutions that you can test and iterate upon. So I joined Kaleidoscope about 12, 13 years ago as a biomedical engineer. And over the last 12 years, we've grown it from a 30-person consultancy working on projects with very diverse clients from med tech to consumer electronics to world-class products that you and I might use every day into about a 600-person team that's part of Infosys, a global technology powerhouse. And our team today is working in incredibly diverse fields from the energy sector to aerospace to med tech, creating new systems that hopefully will be helping real people in the future. And
mm,
our goal all along is to maintain this human-centered design approach to how we create these technologies that we're inventing with our clients.
I see. And can you give me, like, say, an example of what a technology you've created for, human centered with human centered design?
Absolutely. So one of the programs we've been working on the last few years is all about gene therapy and how
Mm,
do you um, give patients an option rather than going into an ophthalmologist, an eye doctor every month or every 6 weeks to get an injection into their eye. Can you deliver a gene therapy once and allow them to get treatment for 6, 12, 24 months potentially? So a much better patient experience, but this is a complex procedure. And what we were trying to do is delivered this gene therapy using what's called electroporation, using electricity to open up holes in the cell wall that would allow the gene to get into the cell without a viral vector. And this is important for immune response reasons, for safety reasons, but it also really comes down to how quickly can the physician deliver this therapy for their patient? Because you can imagine injecting a drug into the eye takes just a couple of seconds. So we don't want to replace that with a surgical procedure that's long, it's complicated, it's potentially dangerous. That takes 45 minutes, 90 minutes. That's a huge interruption into the way these ophthalmic practices work. So we have to understand what is the clinical approach to treating these patients and make sure that whatever we invent fits within their practice. So we were able to create this procedure that only takes 45 seconds, one surgeon, one set of hands, rather than 45 minutes, two
mm,
surgeons, four sets of hands, or two sets of hands rather. and really improve that process. But in doing so, you have to involve researchers, designers, engineers, doctors, nurses. All of these folks have to come together, and then you can bring the physicists, the gene therapy scientists, the manufacturing technologies, even predictive analytics of what kind of therapy protocol could be delivered here. If you flip that and reverse it, you could end up inventing a technology that just doesn't work. And maybe it works scientifically, but it doesn't work within the daily flow of an ophthalmic practice.
Yeah,
And at the end of the day, if we're not meeting those needs, then patients aren't getting care.
absolutely. And in this design process, right, when you're focusing on how you can let it fit in with the current practice, was like something like AI used in predicting that, or maybe some other product design?
Mm.
How was AI used in trying to deal with challenges like that?
That's a really good question. And this program started really before the mass adoption of
Mm,
AI. And so what I will call the traditional approach to product development meant that we were traveling and visiting physicians, physically watching them perform these
mm,
procedures, interviewing them, collecting data, bringing 3D printed prototypes that they could test not on their patients but on simulated models,
yeah,
and it works really well. That's a tried and true process
absolutely.
where
Yeah,
you iterate time after time, but it's also very labor intensive. It takes a lot of time. It's obviously very costly to do it this way, and so with programs today we're expediting a lot of that process using artificial intelligence in different ways. One of which is simply ingesting the data that we create more quickly. So imagine an interview like this. You and I are talking for a few minutes. If you treated this just as a data set, it's um, the actual files might be small, but the amount of data is huge. What are our facial
mhm,
cues? What are we saying? What is the context of our vocabulary? What's the sentiment? Are we optimistic? Are we pessimistic? Are we happy? Are we sad? All those kinds of things. You and I, our brains are just interpreting this in real time. But if you were to take this kind of what we call qualitative data that comes out of user research,
yeah,
it's a huge amount of work to sift through it and actually understand what this
absolutely.
person is saying and what they mean by it. So we're able to use artificial intelligence not to replace qualitative research because we still want human to human interaction.
Mhm, absolutely.
But what it allows our researchers to do is sift through it much more quickly and glean much more interesting, deeper insights out of it, that actually makes qualitative research more accessible. Because a lot of companies, a lot of teams, they know they should be talking to users, but
Mhm,
because it takes so much time, because it costs so much money, they're often prohibited from doing it in the depth that they would like to. So
mhm,
AI makes that much more accessible because it brings the overall barrier to entry down. And we're also using it with our engineering teams, our industrial design, user experience design teams to prototype and iterate much more quickly. Not
mhm,
just ideate, which means coming up with ideas, the brainstorming of potential solutions, but using it to create prototypes much more quickly that work. And AI being able to generate behind the scenes code that make working prototypes that our designers can create means that we can go back to patients, to doctors, to
mhm.
users, whoever these folks might be,
Yeah,
with a prototype that's far more compelling. Not that it's the end solution, but it's something that we can use to gather feedback more quickly. And then we can spend our time designing the real product with a far more focused effort.
absolutely. So what you're saying is kind of helping you streamline the process, making everything just a little bit easier. But with this, is there issues that like faults that might arise, or even ethical concerns that might arise when you're having an AI, sometimes dealing with this data they've taken from
Mm.
humans?
Yes, it's very important to have a responsible artificial intelligence management system,
Hmm.
or policies and procedures in place, as well as technological guardrails. I'm very proud to be part of Infosys, which led the way on a lot of responsible AI, ethical AI framework development and adopting ISO 42001 standards about responsible AI systems. And the reason for that is we're ingesting all of this data about humans. And I'm talking about medicine, but we also work in the energy sector, in aerospace, and retail, where we might be collecting data about people. And we want to make sure we're handling that very securely, robustly, and ethically. So the a good grounding example is still in the medical field where it might be patient data. So you
Hmm.
can't just throw this into a commercial version of ChatGPT or Claude,
Yeah.
as you can imagine.
Yeah.
You need to have these in very well controlled sandboxes, data lockers, where only you and your team can access this data. It's not being distributed out to the rest of the world.
Mhm.
But you also need to make sure that your team isn't being exposed to data that they shouldn't have access to, identifying information about people, patterns and trends about their behaviors. Um, and we need to make sure that we're blinding these studies, meaning hiding and anonymizing the data in an appropriate fashion. And it's particularly interesting with AI in that typical blinding approaches to data that have been used for decades in fields like clinical trials and so on, don't always work in the same way with artificial intelligence because AI can see patterns that we can't see. So just because you and I see a participant number instead of a name,
Yeah.
we might not know who that person is, but
Yeah.
because AI can connect the dots about geography, location, behavior, purchase history, it can
Mhm.
make inferences that would be invisible to you and I. So it's really important that we set up these responsible guardrails around how these data sets function, that they're transparent, we can understand how they're making decisions or recommendations to us, because not only is there a human data element here where we want to make sure we're treating it responsibly, but if we're not careful, we could be getting data out of the system that is incorrect.
Mhm.
So, coming back to my example about interviewing someone and getting
Yeah.
qualitative insights from artificial intelligence, for a very long time, AI models, natural language processing models, did not really have a good way of handling words like not. So, if someone says, I am not happy,
Mhm.
the AI, the NLP system, the natural language processing system, would see the word happy and pull happy out of this context. It wasn't great at connecting not happy as a negative modifier on that word. And so it was really important that our researchers first see that this is happening because you get the data and it's easy to just say, okay, here's my summary. Let me keep moving and use this data. We had to go back through and validate this line by line and create better models. And it's much better than it was even a few months ago,
Yeah.
certainly a couple of years ago. But that's an easy example of how this can lead you astray. But there's much more complex versions or manifestations of the limitations of AI that our research teams have to be careful that they don't just ingest
Mhm.
wholesale. They can't just trust the models at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And one interesting thing that you spoke that I was like, I wanted to pick out is that it's able to see the patterns like we're not able to see specifically. It's like able to connect purchase history, geography.
Hmm.
I didn't realize that was an issue that could have arise. And that's interesting, but also a little scary at the same time, I think.
It
But
can be, and
yeah.
I think it's why we need not just um, policies around security, but we need policies and cultural values in companies around what are we going to do with this data and how are we as the humans guiding these systems going to do so in an ethical way? Because those same challenges of how AI can look for patterns and uncover someone's identity are also its superpower, because it can look for
Yeah.
patterns in the energy sector of how can we operate our grid much more efficiently, effectively, so that we can reduce the overall energy drain
Mhm.
and increase the energy output that's reaching consumers or industries. It can look for disparate patterns, and that's what it's really, really good at.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
important that we just guide these efforts for good rather than unintentional harm that could come out of it.
Mhm. Absolutely. And maybe dealing less with data, what was a time when AI impacted the material outcome of the product? Or maybe it was it impacted like the outcome of the solution, that kind of thing.
Mm.
Is there
Yeah, we have a partner that we work with. They've created this really amazing AI assessment tool for structural engineering.
yeah.
And it's particularly good when you've got conflicting requirements. So imagine an airplane where
Mhm.
it's got to be a very robust, rigid structure, but it also has to be very lightweight. There's only certain kinds of materials that you can
Yeah.
use. There's certain limitations on the geometry, the shape of this body, the structure that's holding something together. And we've been able to use this kind of assessment tool to create the inputs that we need. Here's the load, here's the weight, etc. And it's able to optimize the design of these members so that we can choose the right manufacturing process. Is this a 3D printed metal? Is it cast? Is it machined? How's it manufactured, essentially? And
Cool.
combining that with the design requirements that these things have. And so what we've been able to do is actually reduce the mass, the weight of these structures, these linkages, but
Mhm.
actually increase the strength and rigidity of
Mhm.
these members. And
Yeah.
so what it's allowing our engineers to do is spend a lot more time thinking about other far more complex problems that need to be solved, rather than trying to shave material a little bit by a little bit and then rerunning what's called your finite element analysis or your structural analysis of the stress and strain in these kinds of objects.
Yeah.
So the AI is able to do this in a much more compelling way, fast way, efficient way, that allows our human engineers to spend time on the nuance, the judgment, the things that humans are still incredibly
Mhm.
good at
Yeah.
doing, far better than machines, and kind of automate those very routine applications that take a ton of time, but
Mhm.
are incredibly important to the
Yeah.
output. So we're able to create a better airplane, a better aircraft, a better air structure because of these kinds of tools. And I think it's only going to increase. The ability for engineers to um, do things that were not possible before,
Yeah.
combining it with new manufacturing methods, for example.
Absolutely. And with this, like with the advent of AI, you're having engineers, for example, having to work with AI on a more daily basis. Would it is like the engineers nowadays, are they more experienced in like AI kind of things, or are there job fields that are coming out where it's fully focused on combining AI with with their field of study? Is that something that's
Mm.
happening?
I think, Ashant, this is an area where you and your generation will be able to create whole new jobs,
Hmm.
linking these kinds of technologies together. Because right now, there are certainly AI roles in companies. You see it all over the place. Whole teams working on nothing but creating new algorithms that function as tools for the rest of the company. But when it comes to, think of an electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, computer scientist. It's really those experts and practitioners who are using AI, not necessarily that it's a whole job in and of
Yeah.
itself. But I could envision a future where you've got a squad, a team of um, designers, let's say, and there are people on that team where their whole job is to be the design to AI interface and creating tools just for themselves as these super power users of artificial intelligence that is very domain specific. Because what works for AI and computer science and programming and software development is very different than what, let's say, an industrial designer who's creating a new sneaker would need a tool to function as.
Yeah.
But the advent of technology into these spaces means that those designers need to be cross-trained in ways they haven't before. And so I really applaud folks like yourself who are thinking about, computer science and the fundamentals of technology development, but you're exploring different fields with that. You and I have talked about
Mhm.
your previous research
Yeah.
in climate exposure, climate change affecting humans in retinal disease and genetics. And I think we need a lot more of this cross pollination to match really, really deep technical expertise with really, really deep domain
Mhm.
expertise in all these various fields. And it's going to create whole new jobs
Absolutely.
for future generations.
And maybe overall, let's focus on jobs. What are some AI design trends that you might see within the next 5 to 10 years?
AI design trends or use of AI in design, the trends,
Yeah,
is that what you're
yeah,
asking about?
yeah. How will it, within your company, for example, how do you think it might change within the next couple of years? How do you think the use of it might change, or even things like competitors or other people within the
Mhm.
business, that kind of thing? How do you think that'll change within the next 5 to 10 years?
I think it's going to allow us to suss out the real problem that needs to be solved in these complex systems much more quickly.
Hmm.
Because right now we still see highly iterative approaches to product development, which again, it is effective, it works, it just takes a lot of time and a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And often what we find is you solve one problem and you
Mhm.
uncover another problem. Think about a like a warehouse automation or manufacturing robotics, where we
Mhm.
do a lot of work at Kaleidoscope in this space, designing the robots and the systems that um, make these manufacturing and warehouse centers function, but it's also the human machine interface. And so you might solve a problem upstream, only to find out you've created a problem somewhere downstream.
Yeah.
And what I firmly believe is that by better enabling our teams to use predictive analytics, artificial intelligence, not just to design the solution, but to look at what are the connecting threads to the rest of these very complex ecosystems. How is data moving? How are machines talking to each other? What is the schedule of the human operators coming in and out of these
Mhm.
systems? How are their behaviors affecting performance? We're going to be able to see predictive approaches to problem solving, where we're no longer going to go one problem at a time sequentially. We're going to
Mhm.
be able to see all the
Mhm.
parallel streams that need to be affected at the same time. So I
Absolutely.
think it's going to create far more effective project management, program management
Mhm.
that are leading design teams, engineering teams to create these solutions such that they are all helping each other and not
Yeah.
necessarily working against each other, because that happens a lot. These companies are complex. These facilities are incredibly complex, almost like organisms in and of themselves. You change one thing and everything else changes around it. There's a massive butterfly effect in
Yeah.
these kinds of
Absolutely.
places. And I think AI will allow us to be far more intelligent about how we
Mhm.
approach problem solving and making sure that one problem that we're solving isn't creating a new one.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the way you put it, I think, is really well. Organisms, you said, right?
Mm,
Each section is its own thing, and in order to manage that, you're going to need something that's going to, be able to look at every single little piece at the same time. And there's one other thing I wanted to talk to you about. Of course, Kaleidoscope works with design and that kind of things, items that talk directly to the consumer or to humans. And what a lot of these companies are doing is that they're implementing AI chatbots, for example, on their websites, or AI people that you talk to and like, hey, can I get this product? And then it'll look for their directory for them. What's your view on them? Do you think they're useful? Is that something that you currently do, or tell me what you think about
Yeah.
AI?
I think like an AI chatbot is the first baby step of the way humans interact with artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
And it's a very obvious way to communicate what you're thinking into a machine, into a
Yeah.
computer, but it's very rudimentary. I
Mhm.
think it can be very impactful. I'm sure we've all seen the news too, where it can go wildly off the rails, and these chatbots aren't always very well designed, very well engineered. So I think it's important that if you're building them, you're working with a partner or your own team
Mhm.
who is thinking about all of these complex issues around technology development that you and I have been talking about for the last few minutes. But I also think this is the first evolutionary step. I think in the future, you're going to see a lot more invisible UX, meaning it's not you typing into a chat bar. It's almost invisible overlay of artificial intelligence that is just doing what you want
Yeah.
it to do because
Yeah.
it better understands you, your behavior, your inclination, your frustrations, your hopes, all of these kinds of things, so that it's not waiting for you to prompt it. It
Mhm.
might be prompting you of this is what you might want to do next, or have you thought about these kinds of things? I went ahead and scheduled this for you just in case, but feel free to cancel it if that wasn't the right thing. So I think you're going to end up having a lot less we as humans command and control what the chatbot is doing or what the artificial intelligence is doing, and have it function a lot more integratedly into how we operate our daily lives, our companies, our decision making. So I'm excited for that future because I think chatbots have a
Mhm.
place, but they're also very limited in the fact
Yeah.
that a lot of people um, first thing they do when they go to a website is they close that window, right?
Yeah.
Or you find out it's hallucinating and you say, okay, I don't trust
Mhm.
this anymore.
Yeah.
So it's a good, important step. And the folks who are implementing it well are getting a lot of value out of these kinds of systems, but it will evolve. And I don't think in the future you'll see nearly as many of them as we do right now.
Absolutely. Balancing human judgment with like AI models, for example, like when it starts scheduling stuff for you, it's extremely useful. But then when it starts, purchasing products
Hmm.
on command of you and doing these things that, you can say like, hey, I don't want to do that. But oftentimes, it's going to be difficult to manage human judgment with chatbot judgment. That's a pretty interesting dynamic that's coming up right now and probably be an issue in the future.
I'll say one of the teams we have, two of the teams we have at Kaleidoscope are called Human Factors Engineering and Design Research, and these
Mhm.
are these are people who understand human psychology really well as
Yeah.
the human machine physical interfaces that go on. And when you talk about this kind of prediction and machines kind of going awry and making decisions for us that we don't intend, I think it's really important that we bring that humanity element into this approach. We often talk about AI purely as a technical solution with computer science and developers at the core of it. But I think it's all the more reason why we need psychologists, philosophy, ethics, behavior. The research of human behavior is going to be even more important in the future than it
Mhm.
is now. So,
Yeah.
if we're not careful, we're going to create this kind of technological future that ignores our desires as human beings. And so we've got to create these multidisciplinary teams, like you said,
Mhm.
to make sure that
Absolutely.
the dynamics between these systems are actually net positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And for students interested in this field, you were talking about like there's human-centered human behavior study is going to be a lot more used. For students like interested in this field, what skills or experiences should they focus on developing now? Should it be within, studying humans? What should it be in technology or a combination of both?
That's it's going to be different for every student as to what they're interested in. I think if you're the kind of person who is very interested in the algorithms, the models themselves,
Hmm.
go deep into the mathematics, into
Yeah.
the probabilistic programming and fuzzy logic that's required in developing these systems. Embrace the technical path.
Hmm.
But I think for many of us, the goal should be how do we use these technologies in ways that can make us more effective. So
Hmm.
still become masters of your own craft, if
Yeah.
that's design or engineering or biology, even English, literature, history, become a
Hmm.
master of that
Yeah.
craft, but embrace these technologies to help you be a better version of yourself. So don't shy away from them. Learn from them, experiment, play around, make mistakes, and then find other like-minded people.
Hmm.
I'm really impressed. I'm here in Cincinnati, Ohio. We've got the University of Cincinnati here, and there's a fuzzy logic team
Hmm.
that's undergraduates, graduate students, PhDs, full professors who are doing nothing other than exploring how AI can be applied across every industry.
Yeah.
It's led by an aerospace engineer and a biomedical engineer, but they're looking at NASA applications. They're looking at healthcare applications. They're looking at retail applications. They're looking at human psychiatry and mental health applications. And so find those people in your world and just ask them, hey, can I learn from you? Can I experiment with you? And I think you'll find passion is met with passion. And so figure out what makes you tick and go find the folks who are trying to make that field better. And you'll invent the future, I think, together.
Absolutely. That's a great way of saying it. Thank you so much for this. And I've just noticed we went a little bit over time, but this has been an insightful and inspiring conversation. And thank you so much for sharing your perspective on how AI can amplify human creativity and passion and innovation. And before we conclude, is there anything you want to share to our listeners? Perhaps something you're doing right now, a lesson, or maybe you want to expand on what you said about young innovators.
Mm. The only final thought I'll leave you with, and Ishant,
Mm.
and this has been a wonderful conversation. I
Yeah.
appreciate you having me today. Is stay multidisciplinary.
Hmm.
If I'm a biomedical engineer, my passions and outside of work are, I like to grow plants, I like to garden, I like to
Hmm.
take pictures and explore photography. And in each of those, I'm seeing technology crop up in different ways. So
Hmm.
I think by expanding your horizons, you can see, oh, how is artificial intelligence affecting photography and
Yeah.
editing? How is it use allowing us to create better semiconductors? Not that the goal of that is to make me better at my job, but it exposes me to new ways of thinking about the
Hmm.
world. Same thing
Absolutely.
with how these complex organisms of the world, the gardens we were talking about earlier, microorganisms affecting each other, fungi affecting plants and animals, and you see this closed loop
Hmm.
that helps itself. You see the world in a different way when you learn about very diverse fields of interest, and I think cultivate that in yourself. Don't become so myopic in your approach to say nothing else matters other than this one thing that I'm focused on. You might go really far in that one field, but I think you'll end up missing ways to converge what's happening in the world. And that's where real breakthroughs happen when you can make those very disparate connections. So be interested in everything
Yeah.
to some extent. Be a constant learner. Be very curious and just ask
Mhm.
how does that work? Why does it work? And take that approach to everything in life. And not only I think will you be successful in however you define that word, but it'll be fun too, and you'll stay engaged. And I think that's a big part of what life's all about is continuing to improve yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for this conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to keep watching, share it with your friends. And if you want to be a guest on Amplified, or if you do know future guests, please contact me at ishamajumdar@gmail.com. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation.